How's it going, everybody's? Welcome to my Starcraft 2 unit tier list. Some of you might not know this, but I used to play a lot of Starcraft 2. My first YouTube videos on this channel were pretty much all Starcraft 2 content with me and my friends. And I'm kind of trying to get back into the game recently. I haven't played in a while, but I wanted to make a quick tier list, kind of go over all of the units, give my thoughts on them, and who knows, maybe I'll look back on this after I played a while. Maybe I'll be like, oh, I was really off on a few things, I completely forgot about a few things. Or maybe I'll look at this and I'll be like, yeah, bro, I kept a lot of my knowledge. So, I'm not really sure how I'm gonna order these. I think I'm gonna try to go like in kind of an order of importance, like starting with important unit. Anyway, like, bro, I don't know, I want to do this quick. There's a bunch of units. I'm gonna go crazy. Let's get started. Let's start with some, like, kind of important units. So again, it's not gonna be super ordered, but I'm gonna go as I feel. Let's start with the Marine. Super important Terran unit. You know, you use it in all three matchups. Has stim, has combat shield, and combat shield pretty much negates the first use of stim in combat, which is extremely good. You can stutter step. You can pretty much catch every single early game army once you have like 8-9 Marines with stim. You can like catch stalkers trying to gain map control. You can defend against a big amount of lings. When at the top level, when people target down banelings in TVZ, it's like Marines are so incredible. They do so much DPS, and then you can heal them with medevacs, and it goes absolutely crazy. Super cost effective. You already know you can build them super fast. You know it's kind of one of the best units in the game. Next up, we just talked about the medevac, how you can heal units. Also, I'm gonna put it in S tier. One thing that's extremely good about the medevac is that it regenerates its mana. You heal with its mana bar, and that energy, I should say energy, that energy goes up forever, like always regenerating, so you technically get infinite value of your medevacs because you can constantly stim with your units. You can always take trades as long as your units stay alive. You can heal them back up. Super good unit, S tier as well. Next up, we're gonna switch it up. Let's go to another race. Let's talk about the Stalker, another S tier unit, super emblematic Protoss unit. Once again, used in all three matchups. Blink makes it, like, in theory, at an infinite amount of APM, probably one of the best, if not the best unit in the game. I'm sure if you ever looked at AI who was experimenting and playing StarCraft 2, AI would be like playing Protoss, and with infinite APM, with uncapped APM, they would just blink micro stalkers like individually and perfectly and target fire. It's like, imagine if 200 people for 200 supply were each controlling a single unit perfectly. That's pretty much what would happen in it. Yeah, super strong unit. Let's go for a more early game unit for Protoss. The first unit for Protoss, first unit you get when you build a gateway, the Zealot. You know what? I'm gonna put it in A tier because it's not as overpowered as the other units, but it's still a super good unit. The main problem with what am I saying? It's not really a problem, but it's hard to get map control going with only Zealots. You build Zealots in your comps as Protoss. Zealots are great with charge to deal with like banelings in TVZ because like they can kind of create a meat shield for your army. In TVP, they can get in melee range of those Marines, which makes all those splash units for the Terran kind of friendly fire, which is really good. And in TVT, you can always use them from one by, in alter matchup, use them from one by. And, they kind of close the gap really well. They kind of allow you to really commit to a big fight. But it's not as overpowered, it's expensive for when it does 100 mineral. And it kind of loses to those other tier 1 or tier 0, you could say, units from each races. So the last tier 0 race, last tier 0 unit, the Zergling, that one's going in S tier. Extremely fast movement speed. Once you get speed, you have the movement speed on creep bonus plus the speed bonus. It's like super easy rotations. You use them at all stages of the game in all three matchups, except maybe in the ultra late game. But then again, in the ultra late game, once the whole map is mined, you can start building links again because you have usually a lot more minerals and gas, and you just keep pumping those really small units to go for run-bys and try to break off enemy buildings and whatever. But yeah, super strong, can morph into Baneling, which, speaking of which, Baneling's always also gonna go in S tier. But yeah, to finish off on the Zergling, you know, it's super good. You use them at every stage of the game in all 3 matchups. It's super cheap as well. Like, out of, like, in pure mineral cost, like, if you spend, let's say, like, 100 minerals on 1 Zealot versus 100 minerals on 4 Lings versus 100 minerals on 2 Marines, I believe, like, Lings win always. And no matter what upgrades you give them. But yeah, super good unit. Next up, the Baneling. Put them in an S tier. It's just a splash damage unit. Every splash damage unit in the game is pretty much S tier by default, just because there's so much to do in Starcraft 2, and splash damage units are like so APM effective. What do I mean by APM effectiveness is like, for a Baneling to be effective, at the highest level it's not true because people split against them and you kind of have to target fire them, but in general, for a Baneling run by or a Baneling attack to be effective, you only need 1 A move to order your army to attack until they reach a certain point. Whereas on defense, you need to split all those units individually, you maybe need to target fire them down, maybe if you're playing Terran you need to pick up in your medevac, and all of that has to be done while still macroing. You want to keep building, you want to keep spending your money, you want to keep building your army, you want to keep like producing units, getting your upgrades. Like, there's so much to do in an RTS game. It only takes like 1 slip up, like 0.5 seconds where you're not paying attention to your army, and boom, instantly you lose like 80 supply of Marines, and you kind of lose the game instantly because Zerg can rebuild its army so fast. You know, you can build Banelings so quickly. Zerg has so much economy in the early game to pretty much the late game because you expand so much faster than your opponents. You can very like just keep pushing, keep putting pressure, and like absolutely destroy your opponent. Alright, next up, speaking of splash damage, let's like kind of keep going in that regard. For Terran, we're gonna put the Siege Tank in here. Super emblematic Terran unit, once again used in all 3 matchup, except in a few circumstances, like in TVP, sometimes you want to avoid Siege Tanks at a certain stage in the game, like let's say your opponent goes for Disruptor, you can easily like, get them from afar. But in TVT you build them always. In TVZ you can opt to use your gas slightly differently in the early game. For example, if you want to spend your gas on a Raven early and build Hellions, you can use your Raven, that first amount of gas to break tumors because it's going to give detection and gain a lot of mat control with those Hellions. Because they deal bonus damage against light unit, you can also like absolutely destroy mineral lines or just fight really effectively versus Lings. But yeah, Siege Tank goes in S tier, deals splash damage. You only need 1 good engagement with a Siege Tank to absolutely demolish an army who isn't prepared. And yeah, super strong unit. Next up for Protoss, the Disruptor. We just mentioned the Disruptor. I'm not going to put it in S tier, I'm actually going to put it a bit lower because although... no. Okay, I think I should go in A tier. I reconsidered. I was going to put it at the top of B tier, but I'm going to put it in A tier for now. Because the splash damage is truly so powerful. Like, 1 big Disruptor shot can instantly win the game. It deals enough damage to break pretty much every single unit in the game, except for like the Ultralisk, the Lurker, the Tank, the Thor. Like, there's like maybe 2 units per race. Like, Thor and Tank don't get 1 shot, Ultralisk and Lurker don't get 1 shot, Colossi and Immortals don't get 1 shot. These might be like the 6th unit that don't get 1 shot by it, which is absolutely crazy. Like, 1 big Disruptor shot can kill 50 supply, and you maybe get 2 or 3. It's like you can win a fight with just 1 big Disruptor hit. It's extremely powerful. And even when you're not hitting, just the threat that the Disruptor poses allows you to gain like so much like pressure. You push forward, you slowly push forward with Disruptor shots, kind of forcing your opponent's army to move back. Or, you know, on defense, that once your first Disruptor comes in, especially in PVZ, sorry, where Zerg goes for like a big all-in with roaches and Ravagers, and they kind of siege up on your base and put Ravager balls everywhere. Once that first or second Disruptor comes in, you absolutely zone out the Zerg, and you can like pretty much destroy his entire army if, once again, you know, he's just doing a bit of macro on the other side of the map and all of the army gets destroyed. So yeah, that's pretty much like the 3 main splash damage unit for all races. Let's talk this time about spellcasters. Let's go for like the 3 spellcasters. They're all gonna go in S tier. This tier list isn't really ordered, I might order it when I'm done, but all 3 spellcasters goes in S tier. Templar, Storm is extremely good. feedback is extremely good. Again, like feedback against infestors specifically is so strong. Like you one-shot an infestor at full health. I believe you might also one-shot a medevac at full energy. It's so strong, and once they're out of energy, you build them into Archons, which are a super strong unit as well. You know, let's put it here for now. Let's kind of open a parenthesis to talk about the Archon. Yes, it deals technically a bit of splash damage, but that's not the reason why it's so good. Archon is like a very effective unit to build because the Templar is so good. So when you're building Templars, you pretty much always end up with Templars with low energy, and those Templars just transforms into Archons, and those Archons can tank for your army. They stand in the front. When the Archon is transforming, that ball that creates can be pushed around by other units, other friendly units, and it has the property to break shield. You know how like the sentry can put out this little hexagon that's like a wall? Whatever, I forgot what this ability is called. This wall from the sentry can be broken by just an Archon walking through it, which is really cool. But yeah, super good unit for the Protoss, but let's go back for the Spellcasters. So yeah, Tempest deals splash damage, like the Storm, not Tempest. The Storm from the Templar deals splash damage, which is really good. For the Infestor, the Fungal, like the push, and you like slow the enemy down, and you like absolutely fuck them over. Like it's crazy. Like, and the Ghost Snipe is extremely good in TVZ. Is also somewhat useful in TVP in certain circumstances. Like a Snipe can one-shot a Zealot, so if you have in the late game a few Zealots trying to run by and you have 2 Ghosts in your base, you can go snipe and kill 4 Zealots running by. But the EMP in TVP is the main utility for the Ghost. It not only removes energy from units, just like how the Infestor's Fungal Growth does and the Templar's Feedback, but it breaks all shields, so it kind of nullifies the Archon altogether in the TVP matchup. And you, at worst, like Terran Protoss on average have half their health in shield and half their health in HP. So at worst, the Ghost deals 50% of the health of the target instantly, which is extremely strong to take these kind of committal engagements. So yeah, and I just thought about it. Like Zerg also has like another spellcaster that's kind of a. It's not like, you know, it's a new unit. I think it was added in a. I forgot. I think fuck it. I don't know, bro. It's a unit. I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't remember if it was Legacy of the Void or Heart of the Swarm, but point is, it's super good. The yoinkting ability is extremely strong. You can like, you have your army and you take a unit and you kill it. You take a siege tank, you kill it. You take the mothership, you kill it. It's so crazy. The blinding cloud, like making it so units like lose their range and like they can't hit as air, like, or you know the thing you put on your unit so they hit faster. It's like, oh, it's crazy. It's the spells from the Infestor are not the Infestor. What's this thing called? The what the fuck is this thing called, bro? I might remember later. This is the Infestor. I kind of forgot about this name. The Farder. The spells from the Farder are super strong, and you regen energy just by eating your own buildings. You can also eat units, I believe, but like you don't care. Your Zerg, all your buildings are biological, so you just eat them, and you gain like all your energy back. Let's keep going. This time I want to talk about detectors. Let's take the 3 detectors. So we got the Raven, we got the Observer, and we got the Overseer. We're gonna put them like this. We're gonna go Overseer here, Observer here, and Raven here. Let's start with the Overseer. Out of the 3 of them, it's probably the easiest to access, and because of that, it's probably the weakest. As Zerg, you only need to tech up to your layer to access Overseers, and yeah, with Overlord Spirit, they can be extremely fast. Its ability to spawn like an imposter from among us is kind of useless, but if your opponent isn't paying attention, it doesn't take that much energy to just place one down, queue him up, and bring it to your opponent. And like, if your opponent doesn't realize it's there, you pretty much always have vision on what he's doing. You can also just bring your first Overseer into your opponent's main, usually in the TVZ matchup, that's done, so that you can see pretty much the entire opening for the Terran. So that's very good, but that's pretty much all it does. The Observer now is invisible, so by default, like having an Observer invisible somewhere is a lot more easy than it is to put the Imposter from the Overseer somewhere. You just get your Observer in position, put it in siege mode, increase its vision greatly, and it's chilling there. It's not as accessible because you need to go for a forge as Protoss to build it, and going for a forge and using like maybe your first unit on an observer means you're not getting your warp prism, you're not getting immortals, and just going for a forge by default means you kind of force yourself into going out of Stargate, and Stargate can give you Phoenixes for early aggression or Void Rays or whatever. So yeah, still better than the Overseer in terms of utility. And now finally the Raven. It's the least accessible out of all of the detector units. Like if you think about the build path you have to go for Raven, it's a barracks, and when that barracks is done, a factory, and when that factory is done, a starport, and then on that starport you need to add a tech lab, and only after that can you build the Raven. And the Raven is 200 gas. 200 gas plus 24 from the tech lab plus 100 from the starport and 100 from the factory. That's 425 gas to get your first Raven out. Obviously, half of it is in infrastructure, meaning like that gas is spent and can be used to produce unit forever. But still, getting that first Raven out can be a big investment for the Terran. And so when playing against cheesy openings such as people going for DTs or Burrowed Roaches, or you can't really do that as Terran, but Cloak Ghost, you know, whatever invisible unit that you need early detection for, and that's mainly cloaked DTs. But DTs are cloaked by default, but you know what I mean. It's a big commitment to go for that Raven, but still, its abilities are extremely powerful. The armor shredding missile, -3 armor on a massive group of units, once again splash damage on that spell, and -3 armor is so powerful, especially as Terran, where most of your DPS comes from your Marines. -3 armor on a Marine that deals 5 damage at 0/0 means pretty much a 60% increase on your Marine's DPS, which is extremely good. The auto turret, not the most useful, but still can be used to kind of create like a positional advantage. You know, units can't walk through those turrets, you can kind of create a wall with them. Still pretty decent DPS. They used to be like, I think it was like back in Wings of Liberty, they would last like 2 whole minutes and it was so overpowered. Now they last a little bit, like they last like 15 seconds-ish, which is still enough to fight throughout the entire fight. But still, like back in Wings of Liberty, that was messed up, I just had to mention it. You can use those turrets also to harass in your opponent's mineral line. If you're feeling greedy, you can like bring your Raven across the map and try to get a sentry down and try to escape with the Raven. Obviously, if the Raven goes down, it's a big commitment, but still, very good unit. And finally, the last spell, the thing that disables, whatever you want to call it, super good. In TVP, you can use it to disable like those first Colossus, those first Colossi, pretty much take an engagement, a very committal engagement instantly. You disable 2 Colossus, and like you can win the game in a fight or lose it if you don't take it properly. But like the Raven is the factor that allows that. And same in TVT. Most big committal fights are engaged with 2 or 3 Raven, using that disable on all of the sieged up siege tank, so your Marines can walk up without instantly dying. So yeah, super strong ability for the Raven. That's why in S tier. Let's keep moving. Let's go maybe on alphabetical order this time. I kind of don't really have a lot of ideas on how I'm gonna order them. Let's start here with the Adept. Adept's gonna go in B tier. You pretty much use it in only one matchup, and it's the early game of TVZ if you want to go for a Glyph Adept opening. Other than that, it's pretty much always your first starting unit in TVP. Sorry, I think I said TVZ, I meant PVZ earlier. You use it in PVZ in a Glyph Adept build, which is pretty good. But the Zergs are getting kind of good at defending against it. When the Glyph Adept build was kind of being optimized, it took longer for Zergs to learn how to defend than it took for Protoss to optimize it. But in the current state of the game, like of the top level meta or whatever, Glyph Adept can be defended if you scout it properly. In TVP, you can use it to scout. Like the first Adept is a lot stronger than the first Reaper. An Adept kills a Reaper in 3 hits. So keeping your Adept at home means pretty much the opponent's Reaper can't do anything. And bringing the Adept across the map means the first Terran unit kind of has to stay at home. Yeah, Adept is pretty good, but only in one stage of the game. That's why I'm going to put it in B tier. And as a scouting unit, it does what it does. Its spell is pretty good because its spell requires a big response from your opponent, but that's pretty much it. Except we were just talking about the Reaper. Let's put the Reaper in slightly lower, C tier as well. You pretty much only build 1 per game. If you even decide to get a Reaper as your first unit, because you can very easily go for a first Marine as your first unit, or 2 Marines into Reactor, or no Marines into Reactor. You're never obligated to go for a Reaper. It's just kind of a safe option to get information. But when you do decide to get it, you only get one, except if you're going for like a Reaper proxy all-in. But even then, that's not the strongest build. If you want a proxy all-in, you might want to just go for Marauders or just a bunch of Marines with SCV to build a bunker instead. Point is, like, it only does one thing, and it's being the first unit to scout, and that's pretty much it. So yeah, kind of worse as a scouting unit than the Adept, so that's why I'm putting it in C tier. Let's keep going alphabetically. Next up, we're gonna put the Carrier here. Carrier's in C tier. Carrier's not the strongest unit. It's like the big flagship Protoss unit, but it still doesn't do the best. It's pretty good because of how difficult it is to micro against, but recently there has been a change that changed the AI's attack priority on the Carrier, where previously, if both army A moved, the Carrier army would send out all the interceptors, and the other army would just target each interceptor individually and get beaten. But now with this new AI, units are more favored to attack the Carrier itself, and when the Carrier dies, obviously it stopped producing units, so all of the DPS goes away. But the point is, you need a decent amount of micro to build against it, so by default it can't be the best unit. Like, if the Carrier was the best unit, all Protoss would do is A-move Carriers and it'd be like impossible to defend against. And so it is weak, but you need high APM to defend against it. So like, at lower leagues, maybe I'd put it like here or here, but at like a medium to high level to very high level, it's around C tier in my opinion. Next up, Colossus. I'm gonna put it C tier as well. No, it's higher than the Carrier. Let's put it in B tier. Very good unit, deals splash damage. In TVP, you can break Marines with it in like only 2 swipes, which forces Terran to go for a lot of Marauders, and Marauders are a lot less cost effective than Marines. So just that fact alone is very good for the Protoss. Like, the fact that the Terran army is significantly weaker, even if the Colossus isn't good against Marauders, the fact that the Terran is forced to build Marauders means like you're fighting against a much weaker army. In TVZ, breaking Zerglings is very good. When you start getting that first big army, after you pretty much like start accumulating a lot of units, you get Stalkers, you get Charge Lots, you get a few Immortals, you have your War Prison to reinforce, you have Sentries to shield. Having 1 or 2 Colossus in that army, they have so much range, especially with the range upgrade, that you can pretty much utilize it as a siege unit, similarly to how you would a siege tank. But still, it has a few big flaws, a few big weaknesses, like notably that it counts as both a ground and an air unit. So air-to-air units can just shoot it down. Like as Terran, you only need 2 or 3 Vikings to start dealing with them. As Protoss, you don't really get Phoenixes to counter them, but as Protoss, it's not the best because Protoss units are a lot tankier, like they're bigger, tankier units that cost more supply, so the splash damage gets less value. And in TVZ, only a few Corruptors can take it down pretty easily. Next up, let's talk about the DT. It's a cloaked unit. I'm gonna put it in S tier. It has charge, not charge, it has blink. It has an upgrade that allows it to blink, which is extremely good, but just by default, it's a cloaked unit. If we want to talk about APM efficiency again, once again, 1 right click into your opponent's mineral line. Once the Dark Templar gets there, he will start attacking whatever's nearby him, and that's all the workers. And if your opponent needs to rotate their army, bring its detector, or as Terran maybe bring a scan, which means you have 1 less mule, and like there's a lot more that's demanded on your opponent's part to respond against a DT, and it requires good or decent scouting in the early game to notice if your opponent is going for like a big DT push in the early game to try to catch you off guard. So very strong unit in that regard, and pretty good unit. Next up, let's talk about the Immortal. Definitely like an A tier unit. Super cost effective, super strong, it deals so much damage. Its ability, whenever it casts like automatically. I believe you might be able to cast it manually, but the point is it casts on its own, so you don't even need to worry about it. Whenever it gets hit, like once every maybe 30 seconds, it generates a shield that like tanks the first 100 damage it takes. So when you take these big committal fights where you want to stutter step forward with your Immortal, you can tank a lot of damage. You're in PvZ, your first Immortal comes out and can like destroy 2 or 3 or 4 roaches without even losing health. and then you bring it back into your shield battery, regen all of its shield, and like it's a very good unit. It's a very good unit. You don't use it as much in TVP because you want to spend your gas on other things. You want Disruptor, you want you want maybe like Colossi to deal with Marines, you want your Stalkers, you want your Warp Prism to rally across the map, but like as a defensive unit, like your first Immortal coming out is usually the main factor that determines whether or not you will hold an all-in. And you know, building Immortals also means you can't go for Warp Prisms, so that's also like a downside, but still it's a super good unit. I just talked about Warp Prism, let's put it here in S tier as well. Like it's kind of like a transport unit, you could classify it as. Contrary to the medevac, it doesn't heal, but it allows you to create a force field when it's in its, not a force field, like a pylon zone or whatever, when it's sieged up, which means you can rally across the map. It's also a fast pylon rally, so like it's a fast warp in. That's super good. So yeah, that's a very good unit. I don't have much to say about it. When you play a lot of these early game Protoss builds that require a warp prism to rally across the map, the builds are like usually super optimized, where like you warp in your first round of units, and as they walk across the map, you warp from your warp prism to get a second rally, like already across the map. But it's very good. And yeah, dude, there's a lot of good units. I'm kind of going with the good units first, but don't worry, like we're kind of getting to a point where there's not a few very strong units left. Let's try to find like the big units, and then we'll go like from S to F. Queen, I'm gonna order it right here because Queen might be the strongest unit in the game. You can build it mineral only as soon as you get your spawning pool, and you already want your spawning pool as Zerg. Your spawning pool, if you go for hatch into pool, like 14 hatch, 16 pool or something, the hatch will finish at the exact same time as the pool. Both hatchery can produce a queen, and like once you get your queen production going, you pretty much build queens until you have like 8, 7 or 9, because they're so good. They spread creep, they inject. Like queens are like your are your production. You inject for your production. They're your map vision from creep. They're your defense. They're your anti-air. They heal each other. They're a super strong unit, and they only cost mineral, meaning like as Zerg, because of how good the queen is, you can usually get your third base fully saturated before you go for your second gas. Like a big builder, like a common builder as Zerg, is to go 1 gas. Once you reach 100 mineral, you pull out 2 of those workers from the gas back into your mineral, so you only keep 1 worker in the gas because you need so little gas. You get a bunch of minerals, you build queen, you expand, you build workers, you build ling, you build overlords, but you never need a gas unit because like all of your thing is mineral only. Your queens can defend, like 4-5 queens can defend against like 8 aliens if they're split properly. They can defend against adepts. Like when the adepts arrives, you warp in a few links. Queens and links will defend against the adepts. In ZVZ, like they defend against links. Like they're such a strong unit. It's like kind of crazy, but then again, Zerg kind of needs it because, like, I mean, like it wouldn't be like the biggest of deal if like the queen cost maybe like 25 gas, right? But like it would still be a pretty huge impact. Like, but anyway, queen is very good, and it's like the main defining unit of Zerg. Anyway, let's move on. Let's go for like another high tier unit. Marauder, gonna go in A tier. Once again, not as cost effective as Marines, but still good. Deals bonus damage against armored, so that's useful. They can tank for your army, that's usually their purpose. They get in front, they tank, and your Marines take a lot less damage, and your Marines are the DPS, but still not the greatest unit. Let's go Viking. All the air-to-air units are pretty high tier. Viking, S tier, definitely. Out of the 3 air-to-air units, I think Viking's definitely the best. I don't have much to say about it. You can like make it into ground mode, which is kind of useless, except when you finally clear up all of the air. You can bring them down to the ground and assist with your ground army. It can also be used as run-bys. You can bring your Vikings across the map into a mineral line and go into ground mode, and they will 2-shot workers. It's pretty good. Next up, another high tier unit, a siege unit, the Liberator. Kind of similar to the siege tank. You siege it, and you know Terran has like big siege units, right? Terran is like the siege control race, you know. And Liberator is very good. It one-shots workers, it deals so much, it deals like 60 damage per shot. It's like, you two-shot a Stalker, one-shot Marines, one-shot workers. Like, it's so strong. But it's a siege unit, so you need to micro it, and it's static, so like Ravager Bios, for example, can always land on them. Similarly to how Ravager Bios can always land on tanks. So that's kind of why it's not in S tier. Like, Terran also needs gas to build other air units. So Liberators are cool, but you want Medivacs, you want your Ravens, you want your Vikings for air control. But still, Liberators are very good. APM effective once again. Queue them up, one siege up across the map into the Mariner line, and your opponent needs a big response to defend against them. Talking about like those air-to-air units, let's keep going. The Corruptor. Corruptor's gonna go one tier below. Where's the Corruptor? There he is. One tier below the Viking. Very good, but not as good as the Corruptor. Still, you need it, every race kind of needs those big air-to-air unit, deals bonus damage against armor, so it's good against Void Rays, it's good against Tempest, it's good against the Mothership. It kind of struggles in TVZ because Terran just has better air-to-air units, but in TVP, you kind of use it to break, also against carriers, super strong unit. Next up, the final air-to-air unit, the Phoenix, one tier below once again. It's good on its own. There's a few Protoss builds where you go mass Phoenix, and like 8 or 9 Phoenix, once they start like picking up a unit, the 8 that aren't spellcasting break that unit, and then you pick up another 8 shot volley, like a bit volley, break a unit, just pick up a unit, break a unit, pick up a unit, break a unit. Phoenix are also super fast. When they go across the map, they can pick up 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 workers and then leave without taking damage. Yeah, super good unit, but still not the best air-to-air unit. It's gonna go below the other ones because like it's kind of not the best. And the reason for that is that the Void Ray is better. Void Ray is gonna go in A tier. Void Ray is not only like the big air, when you go air as Protoss, like your big damage comes from Void Rays and carriers. But Void Rays can also hit ground as opposed to the Phoenix. Void Rays also, when they activate their ability, deal bonus damage against armored, which is really good. Yeah, Void Rays are pretty badass. You build Void Rays, you gain map control in PvZ because the Void Rays can go around and clean up all the overlords that are scattered across the map. They can also defend against Ling, Roach, Ravagers, all-ins because they're air, like they're invincible. You get 1 or 2 Void Rays and they just fire forever, and your opponent is forced to fight into your Void Rays and kind of commit to the battle, and they want the battle to end as fast as possible. But Protoss is a big defensive race because of its shield batteries, so like Void Ray is very good in that regard as well. Another good unit. Oracle's gonna go in A tier. I'm not sure if I want to play this in S tier. Its spells are decent, like the Revelation is pretty chill. The trap, like the stasis trap or stasis ward, I think it's called, is also pretty good. But it's not the best, right? It's kind of expensive, and it's good for mineral harassment, but that's pretty much all it does. It's like best in class harassment for both PvP, sorry, and PvZ, and because the SCV has like more HP than the other workers, because each worker has its like gimmick, if you want to say. Like Zerg units just on creep regenerate health, so they have less health. Protoss units regenerate their shield out of combat, so they have less health. And Terran units need to spend time to either repair or heal, so they have slightly more health. The SCV has slightly more health. Still, Oracle is very good, just not useful throughout all the stages of the game. Like pretty much every unit in S tier is like useful at every stage of the game. The Oracle isn't, just because you build maybe 1 or 2 or 3 to harass with Miracle, and then you need to bring them back across the map if you even manage to keep them alive, because you will need them to defend because you're spending a lot of resources on them. And if your opponent just all in, no matter how many workers you kill, if you lose the game, you lost the game. Let's keep going. Another good unit, Mutalisk. Mutalisk gonna go in B tier, I think. Not super high tier unit, but still a big amount of Mutalisk kind of running across the map, similarly to how 8 or 9 Phoenix can run across the map and absolutely disrupt the mineral line. Mutalisk are very good in that regard, but they don't require that much work to be countered. Like for example, the Tor. Tor is gonna be also a B tier unit. Tor's just 1 Tor. When the Terran gets like 1 Tor and has 1 Tor in position for each of the Mutalisks run by like areas, like bro, the Tor, like in its AoE mode, like boom, 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 boom. In one shot, you deal half of the health of all of the Mutalisk. Super strong. Next up, Banshee. Cloaked Banshee, A tier. Not S tier like the... maybe... No. Definitely not S tier. Not S tier like the Dark Templar, because it's energy based, so you have to control your energy. And at some point it just runs out. And because Terran... Because it's like a starport unit, you have a lot more tech to go through to build your first Banshee, and then you need to research Cloak on top of it as well. Still, very good for worker harassment in TVZ, very good for a few all-ins in TVT, and can also be used in TVP, once again, kind of to harass workers or to kind of force your opponent to get out some detection early, which forces them to go into a forge and everything. Good unit, not the best, that's why it's in A tier, not S tier. Next up, Roach and Ravager, both are gonna go in S tier. Where's the Roach? I see him, there's the Roach. Roach, the best probably the most cost-effective unit for Zerg. Like having 8 or 9 Roaches, like you can build them so fast. Once again, the Roach Warrant doesn't even cost gas, so on 1 or 2 gas, you can have a bunch of Lings and a bunch of Roaches, and when Roaches go to low health, you morph them into Ravagers, and you can, because it's so little gas, you have so much mineral economy, you can keep expanding, you can keep saturating your mineral line. You can build a lot of Roaches purely on mineral, meaning like you don't need to waste minerals by having workers go on gas, you know. So yeah, Roach is super good, Ravager super good as well. Its spell is extremely strong to attack because against buildings or against siege up units or whatever, even against just armies in general, like it forces the opponent to go back, and against building you always hit your targets. Against siege up units you force them to unsiege. So yeah, super good, both units super good. Next up, the Hydralisk. It's going to go a lot lower than the Roach, and the reason is that the Roach is so good. There's no reason to build Hydras in your armies except when you want to start hitting air, right? Like the Zerg army will pretty much consist of Roach Ravager or Lingbane until the opponent starts to tech into their big flagship units, and you need those Hydralisk to shoot the air. Even then, you know, it's not the best at doing that because Corruptors are already pretty good at air-to-air. So yeah, not the best unit, but it can morph into the Lurker, which is definitely an A-tier unit. Once again, it's cloaked. Like when you bury it, it's cloaked, so you need a response out of your opponent to deal with it. It's a siege unit. It doesn't deal splash damage, but like it shoots in a straight line. It pierces through that whole line. So like two or three of them, 2 or 3 Lurkers sieged up in a position, and like an army unsuspectingly is trying to walk in, like can absolutely get destroyed. Like they absolutely massacre Marines and like massacre Lings and whatever. So yeah, a very strong unit, and because it requires kind of a fast and like aware response of your opponent, like it's pretty good by default. Like you just siege it up somewhere, and your opponent, if they ever walk in that position because they try to attack, they need to bring a detection, maybe like manage their range, split their army properly so that they don't take too much splash, and target them down so that they're not fighting inside siege up units, you know. Alright, next up, Widowmine, S-tier unit. It recently got a pretty massive nerf where its splash radius has been greatly reduced, and the marker that like tells the opponent which unit has the Widowmine locked on is a lot more noticeable. Instead of being like a small line, it's like a big red laser line, so you can like instantly notice what's the unit you need to split off your army. Just because of that, it kind of got nerfed, but still, like Widowmines are so strong, they're super cheap, you don't need a tech lab on your factory, so you can go a reactor on your factory, maybe reactor on your barrack, flip the factory on the barrack, start building Hellions, start getting Widowmines when you get your, like in TVZ notably, you get like 4, 6, 8 Hellions, and when the Hellions have done their job, switch into Widowmines. And in TVP, Widowmines as well, very good against Zealots, because unlike siege tanks, they don't deal as much friendly fire when they hit, and their damage is much more focused, and they can deal with zealots like kind of instantly 1 or 2 shots, and the DPS of your marines is extremely strong. Yeah, Widowmines is very good. Widowmine drops also super good. Once again, it's like 1 click for the medivac to walk across the map, 1 click to unload, control click the mines and then burrow them. Like in 4 clicks you break your entire opponent's mineral line if they're not fast enough with their response. So yeah, super good. Next up, we're kind of out of those high tier units. We're gonna go for the Hellion now. It's gonna go in B tier. You pretty much use it in the early game of all 3 matchups. There's builds that go for them, but it's not required. In TVZ it's definitely the best because it deals great against Blings and it deals great against Worker. In TVP it's still good to run by against Worker. Bringing your first Reaper and 1 or 2 Hellions, or maybe 2 Reaper and a Hellion, can be pretty good. And in TVT it's pretty much only used to punish an opponent who goes for an opening that is too greedy, where they maybe want to get their second command center right after the barracks. They want to build it straight on the low ground before they get their second supply depot to fill in the wall. So if you pull up across the map with 1 Hellion, 2 Reaper, and your opponent is going for the reactor on the barracks, so they only have 1 or 2 units out, you will deal a lot of damage, and that's its purpose in TVT. That's pretty much its only purpose in TVT. So yeah, not as good as the other units. It gets siege up into the Hellbat, but that's pretty much once again only used in 1 matchup, and that's in TVZ. If you manage to deal decent damage with your Hellions and keep them alive, or you just don't find an opening, so you're forced to walk back with them, you can go for an armory early, which makes so your Hellions can transform into Hellbat, and Hellbat are a lot better at fighting these static engagements where you're kind of fighting until the army is dead, instead of poking and running back and everything. So yeah, 2, 4, 6 Hellbats with a group of Marines, and the Marines is backed up by the Medivacs. Well, the Hellbats are backed up by the Medivac as well, because it transforms into a biological unit. Yeah, very strong in that regard, but that's pretty much the only stage of the game where you use it. Blue Frame is a pretty good upgrade for a few all-ins or a few aggressive openers where you want to deal damage against Workers, but it's not the best. Moving on. Now there's pretty much no strong units left. Let's go rapid fire them. Big flagship unit for the Terran. Oh, never mind, there's this guy S tier unit, I completely forgot about him. Infinite value, basically infinite value. It has extremely high range. You build, like, in all 3 matchup, it is the main fighting unit of the Zerg army, because it has infinite value. You have your Infestors, you have your, I forgot his name again, and you have your Corruptors, because Corruptors can transform into the Broodlord, and your Broodlord just send units on your army. They send these little shitters and they chip away at your army and they break him, and it's super strong. It's infinite value as long as the units themselves don't overextend and take damage. You just poke and you walk back and you poke and you walk back and you're just chipping away at your opponent. It's one big downside, it is super slow, meaning your opponent usually gets the opportunity to start going for flanking maneuvers and harassment on your base that's opposite of the side of where your big army is located, because you can't really split the army in half, because if it is split in half, then the opponent can just all in on 1 half and take a very efficient trade, and then all in on the remaining army. But still, super strong. Broodlord is super strong. Next up, Mothership is kind of trash. I'm gonna put it in D tier. It's super expensive. It doesn't do anything really. Now the cloak on the Mothership is a spell instead of like a passive that's always active. Its spells are okay, but it is so expensive. All you need is like 1 big pull from this guy, yoink. The Mothership is now in your Corruptors, and all the Corruptors shoot it down. It's super easy to target fire, and it's just not that good. Like, the one thing it does the best is probably like kind of clutter the opponent's screen. Like, if you have a Mothership above your spellcasters, it's hard for the opponent to target them down, like target fire each spellcaster individually. But still, like, Mothership is just not that great. It's super expensive, doesn't do that much, but it has some uses. It's just, it usually dies instantly in the fight, and that's its purpose. It just tanked a little bit for your army. Next up, the Battlecruiser. Gonna go 1 tier ahead. There's a there's like one build where you can go for an early battlecruiser in TVZ, where you blink your battlecruiser across the map or warp it across the map and try to harass, and if your opponent doesn't have their spores ready and their queens in positions, you can get a few worker kills, and then depending on how well your first attack went, the Yamato on the queens can absolutely destroy them. You can warp in another battlecruiser in a third, and like then kind of start spending your gas on something else. But it's just not the best. Like, flagship units are kind of poor, except for the Broodlord, because the Broodlord just has like legit that infinite value and has such great support from the Zerg spellcasters, whereas the carrier fights with the Tempest Storm, and so it's okay in that regard. But the battlecruiser doesn't even fight with Ghost. Like, the battlecruiser doesn't have the support that the Broodlord does, neither does the carrier, so they're kind of a lot lower tier. Next up, I'm gonna put Tempest in D tier as well. Super expensive, super low DPS. It has the highest range out of any unit in the game. You can go for a few builds like where you kind of cheese with it, where you kind of proxy it and you try to just break your opponent, target down individually, like in PvT for example, just like go for proxy Void Ray to proxy Tempest, and like 2 or 3 Tempest, one-shotting a Marine, one-shotting a Marine, one-shotting a Marine, and when you have 4 or 5, maybe one-shotting what's it called? This guy, a Cyclone, and kind of try to push forward slowly. But it's just not the best unit. It's once your opponent like kind of manages to defend against your all-in, like they deal so little DPS. Like, its only advantage is that you're always fighting out of range, but when your opponent decides, okay, fuck it, we're fighting to the death, it doesn't have enough DPS. Like, Stim Marines catch up to it instantly, and they run under it, and poof, poof, poof. Despite the fact that it has like a massive health bar, like the health bar is large above its health is actually super low, like, so it really doesn't survive that long. So it's kind of like an imposter, you know. If its health was as big as the health bar would suggest, it'd be pretty good, but like, it just dies instantly. Next up, Cyclone. Gonna go in B tier. And now the Cyclone has gone a pretty significant rework. Before, it was like pretty much the exact same cost as a siege tank, and you build it after a tech lab was added to your factory. And yeah, that was like your decision. Either you go for an early siege tank to defend against the ground, or your opponent is going for like air, like maybe an Oracle, maybe proxy Void Ray, or whatever, and you want to get that Cyclone. That was kind of the decision. But now it is a normal unit. You can build it while having not the tech lab, but the reactor. So you can build 2 at a time. They're a lot cheaper, they deal less damage, they have less health, and its ability is slightly weaker. But it is still pretty good. It's a lot like less committal to go for one to defend. Because before, you needed to commit to that tech lab and spend the gas of your first tank on a Cyclone. Meaning like you were down 1 tank. Whereas now, it's a lot easier to get 1 or 2 out instantly and still follow up with your normal build. So yeah, I think it's pretty good. It's gonna go in B tier. It's a decent unit, but you pretty much only use it to defend in the early game. You can go for a team, for like a comp that's called like the battle mech comp, where you go for a bunch of Cyclones and Hellions, and that's very good in TVZ because it's like a very mobile mech comp. But still, it's just not the best. It goes in B tier, but it's still a pretty decent unit. We're almost out of units. How many units do we have left? We have like all the workers plus this bullshit, like the larva, and we have Overlord. What the fuck is this guy called? I forgot his name. The Fart Lord. What the fuck is that guy called? Whatever. And we have the Ultralisk. But the Ultralisk is gonna go in B and C. It's gonna go in C. If you compare it to these other units, like the Colossus and the Thor and the Ultralisk are like the 3 big ground unit, the highest tech ground unit. And it's kinda poop. It's okay, like, it's good when you have nothing else to spend your gas on a Zerg. That's kind of the situation that happens. When as Zerg you lose a big chunk of your army instantly, and you won't get any value out of rebuilding like 2 Infestors and Corruptors that will have to morph into Broodlords. It can be useful to get 2, 3, 4 of those Ultralisk and kind of walk across the map with them because they can break bases very easily, but they're not the best unit. Next up, we're gonna go with the Overlord. The Overlord, just a normal Overlord. I assume like they're talking about the carrier Overlord because like, you know, you don't put the fucking pylon and the supply depot in there. But it's still, dude, I don't know, it's like, I don't know, it's like as a carrier, like compared to the Warp Prism and the other thing that I forgot the name, it's not the Warp Prism, it's the Medivac. Compared to these two, it's kinda ass. It's gonna have to go like in B, I think. Okay, because just because you can walk your first Overlord across the map and just gain very good vision of what your opponent is doing and when your opponent is walking at, like at the risk of losing it. Just because of that, I'm gonna put it in B tier. But as a dropper unit, it's very rare that Zerg goes for like these dropping attacks because Zerg already has so much map control. But you can use it to drop your queens and poop out creep, and then your queens can inject, because if you guys didn't know, if you guys didn't play for a while, queens can no longer inject off of creep because queen walks were so oppressive builds that they kind of had to change that. I remember this guy's name this time, that's why I was thinking for a while. It's the Swarm Host. Swarm Host gonna go in E tier. Might be the worst unit in the game. It technically has the same infinite value potential as the Broodlord, but it just, you build it at a stage in the game where Ghast is already super important, and Zerg has so many other options that are so much efficient than the Swarm Host. Like Lingbane is super strong, World Ravager is super strong, Mutas are very good. Like, you have so many options. Choosing to go for the Swarm Host is like kind of stupid. But it's still, it can win the game if your opponent isn't ready, especially because the tech building to unlock the Swarm Host is the same as the one to unlock the Nidus Worm. So if you want to go for a Nidus Worm, it's kind of natural to then spend your gas on Swarm Host, poop out your Swarm Host like at your opponent's third if your opponent hasn't gotten their third, or at their opponent's fourth, and kind of fly the Locust all the way in the production of your opponent and kind of try to break everything, or fly them in a base, try to get the base down. Yeah, you used to see a lot of these Swarm Hosts play in PvZ, sorry, but it's a lot less popular now because Protoss are getting a lot better at defending against them, and when you do defend against them, you usually kind of win the game as a defender because they're so supply heavy that like building 12, 13, 14, 15 Swarm Hosts mean like your army is extremely little, and like they don't fight back. They spawn their Locust and then they run away, that's it. So like after the wave of Locust is done, if your opponent decides to start walking up and attacking, you kind of lose the game instantly. It's a very all-in build where Zerg has a lot of better options to go for it. That's probably the worst unit in the game. Next up, like these are like the fucking poops that spawn when Zerg building breaks. Legit, no one gives a shit about it. No, like zero shit given. These are like the Locusts from the Swarm Hosts are gonna go one tier higher because the Locusts themselves are okay, it's just that the Swarm Hosts are very poor. This is the Imposter from Among Us, spawned by the Overseer. It's gonna go in C tier. It's like a pretty significant downgrade of the Observer because it's just not cloaked. Your opponent can just see like, hey, I can't control that unit, I'm just shooting it down. The Larva, like, who gives a fuck? Okay, because it has high health, and after the base goes down, the Larva itself is very hard to kill, so you can have like that final rally of units as Zerg from a broken base. I'm gonna put it in B tier. Like, just like rallying like a final Ultralisk. Like bro, there's a whole Carbot animation about it. Like there's the egg and they're all shooting the egg like and the egg takes like 0 damage and like the Ultralisk comes out of it and it's crazy. Just because of that, it's gonna go in B tier. It's kind of good, like but it's like it's not. It's like a unit. Like you can't even control it. It's just there. It exists. Oh, Sentry. How did I forget about Sentry? Sentry is an S tier unit. All 3 spells on the Sentry are super good. Hallucination gives you insane scouting with like 0 risk. The only risk is technically that's what you spent your energy on. Oh my god, I remember this game. This guy is the Viper. I remember this name. He's the Viper. Okay. The only risk technically is that you spent your energy on a scout that didn't work as opposed to a force field or or the big wall, the like the wall, or the, you know, like the other two spells are super good as well. I forgot the name of the wall spell, but like you create a wall and you cut off the opponent's army and have you like isolate a small chunk of your army, and it makes it super easy for Protoss to chip away at your army, and when the opponent's trying to retreat, like you create a wall behind them, and you're like very good. And to defend against surrounds from Lings and Banelings, kind of like create a wall around yourself to reduce the surface area. Like the big wall spell is extremely good. Force Field is just straight up like range unit, deal less damage to your unit, and that's very good as well. So yeah, super strong unit. Once again, it's a spellcaster. By default, spellcasters in StarCraft 2 are so strong just because they provide so much support to units that are already strong. Like the Stalkers in SA, the Stalkers in S tier, the Zealot and the Immortal are in A tier, and Stalker, Zealot, Immortal, Sentry is a very big, huge comp for the Protoss. And you have High Templars in there as well. When those High Templars run out of energy, they transform into Archons. Like, so yeah, like they provide so much support to already very high tier units, so it's super good. Same theory, same logic goes for the Medivac, right? Medivac heals the Marine, which is super strong. It heals the Marauder, which is super strong. It picks up and like it allows to defend against Banelings because picking up kind of nullifies splash damage. You can also heal Ghost. Having your Ghost at full health is super important. So you know, like those supporting spellcasters or just the supporting units with energy are super strong. The same can be said about the Queen and the Viper and whatever. Like you get the idea. And next up, it's just the workers, but we're gonna order them still. The SCV is the strongest out of the 3 worker because it has just slightly more HP. Like in a one-on-one, just a move fight, the SCV wins. The only downside is that its health doesn't regen on its own. You either need to repair it or have a Medivac heal it. But just having the slight amount of HP means that Oracle no longer 2-shot them, and Adepts no longer 2-shot them, which makes them slightly better. Probe is gonna go right here in B tier, and Drone is gonna go in C tier. They both have the same energy regen, like it's a tie when they fight each other. It's like pretty much determined by like the ping who gets the first hit. But the reason why I'm putting Probe 1 tier higher is that as Protoss, you're using that Probe to scout a lot more than as Zerg. As Zerg, you want to keep your workers like on your side because your Overlord is already scouting, and your Lings can go across the map super fast. So your Probe will scout, and your Probe can be a very good harassment unit when scouting. I'm sure you guys know about like mineral harass, where you just start building the mineral so that the worker sees, oh, this mineral is already being mined, I'm gonna go to another one, and you end up making so your opponent like never mines because your Probe like mines the mineral, stops mining it so it doesn't collect it, mine the mineral, stop mining so it doesn't collect it. Technically all workers can go for this form of harass, but the Probe does the best at it because if it takes like one small hit of damage, like the opponent tells like, hey, I'm just gonna A-move it with one of my workers just to get you off, you're okay with the Probe, you just run away and the damage is temporary. Once you're still regen, you can go back in. Having your Probe also harass the first SCV that builds the barrack on the wall is, on the ramp I mean, is very good as well. Like, it requires the Terran to respond, it requires the Terran to send an additional SCV to fight that Probe, and maybe send the injured SCV back into the mineral line, and like, it's just such a hassle to deal with. So yeah, it just because of like these slight maneuvers, like in the early game as well, there's not that much to do, so you're across the map with your Probe, you mineral harass, you worker harass, you just hit your opponent, you get a big scouting going on. But that's why I'm putting the Probe 1 tier higher, and then finally the Mule, it's gonna go in S tier. Mule is just, it mines I think 225 mineral or 220. It is so strong that it makes going for a scan like detrimental as there. Like you want a scan, but every scan is one less Mule, and each Mule gives you so much money. Like the first Mule already pays for the orbital command, and then it's just infinite value. Every orbital command has enough value to have a Mule constantly up. As soon as the Mule decays, you have energy to cast another one, and you even like accumulate energy by doing that. So yeah, it's super high value. The only downside, and it's not even really a downside, is that whereas other races have means of getting a lot of workers out, Zerg has Inkjet, which makes so you can produce a lot of workers Protoss has Chrono Boost. You can produce a lot of workers if you want, and you expand faster also on average as Protoss because your units are never building. They just like start the build and the build builds on its own. So your workers can go back to mining. You have slightly more income. Because of those factors, Terran has the Mule, right? And the Mule, yes, like closes the gap for the income difference that the race gets, but the Mule only mines mineral faster, right? So you end up mining out faster. But Terran still has that difficulty expanding that the other races don't have. The other races still expand faster. Terran doesn't expand faster. Terran only mines out their bases faster. And so because of that, sometimes in the ultra late game, no matter how much income that Mules gets you, it just won't make a difference because your opponent just mines an extra base. Like the opponent takes one of your bases, a base on your side of the map, and because of that, like they just end up with like, I think each basis is something like 20,000 resource difference because it's like 16k minerals and 4k gas or something. It's crazy. So like fully mining out a base, like the difference between you and your opponent is like 20k resource, and like from that point you can pretty much take 20k, like take it trades down 20k resources, but just because you have more cash, you can win the game regardless. So yeah, that's pretty much my tier list. I'm looking at how I place my units, and they're not very ordered, like they're just in their tier, they're chilling. But I still like how you can like see that units, I've put them together in like their roles, right? The Medevac and the Marine are together, the Spellcasters are together, obviously. These guys are together because they come from the same units, and you know, whatever, like things, the small stuff like that. But other than that, I'm looking at it and I think it's relatively ordered, right? Obviously the builders are here just because they need to be in their respective tier and they don't really mean anything. It doesn't mean that the builder wins a one-on-one fight, right? These units still is not about only the strength of the unit, but it's about everything. It's like the cost effectiveness, and it's like the tech required to get the unit and the commitment behind it. Like if you go, once again, I mentioned this example earlier, if you go for a Forge as Protoss to get an Observer, that's mean you're not getting for a Stargate, and that means you're not getting harassment from Phoenixes, right? If you want to harass with Phoenixes, it means you're sacrificing your early Forge to go, that would allow maybe a Warp Prism, and a Warp Prism means you're maybe not getting an Immortal, and you know, it's like everything has like a cost and some advantage and disadvantage. So, you know, it's always like a choice between each unit, but the units that are in low tier are generally because like the commitment doesn't outweigh the benefits, and the units in high tier is because they're always useful pretty much. Like Spellcasters are always useful in all three matchup, useful at all stages of the game. And then in A tier, they're sometimes a bit less useful, they're more situational. In B tier, they're a lot more situational. In C tier, they're generally considered weak, except for like the Reaper, which is just, there's only one situation when you build it. In D tier, they're just bad unit, and in E tier, it's just the worst unit. That's pretty much how I decided to order this. I'm looking at it right now. I'm not sure if I would change anything, but I will be looking back on it when I do end up going back to play the game. I will make videos on the game. I have a few ideas for videos that are about to come out, and thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you next time, and yeah, have a good day, guys. Bye bye.